All right, well, good morning. We have a quorum present, so we'll bring the meeting to order. First off, Mr. Harvey, if you feel like to call that meeting.
Here we go. Roster that we're going to maintain thanks to Mr. Smith. That's a new idea. Mr. Vedp, here.
Here.
Potato. Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Llewellyn.
Here.
Ms. Bullock. Mr. Carlino.
Here.
Ms. Scott. Okay. Here with Mr. Potato.
Thank you. Mr. Llewellyn, would you lead us in the invitation?
That's correct. My greatest Heavenly Father, thank you again. We come before this county and the one the duty is to make it a better place for citizens to live and work. Lord, we thank you for the many blessings you give each one of us every day. In Jesus' name, we all my prayer.
Let's rise.
Oh, that yours.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible.
indivisible,
Justice.
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, I just want to say welcome. We have a full meeting this morning. We're happy to have Neil Barber in person, Sandy online, and they're going to take some time today and kind of bring us up to speed on what it means, what an EDA is, and what we should do as members, because we have a lot of new members, including myself. So they're going to help provide some guidance for our plan, and so looking forward to that. This time, if there's any communication from any of the citizens, we'll take that. All right. Hearing none, we'll move forward. So you all have a copy of the minutes. It's emailed to you in your packet. I'll give you a short time to look over them. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes as they were circulated?
As a correction. Approval of the minutes that was written by name on there, and who was here last month.
Correct that. All right, so we'll change that to Robert Smith because he presided over the meeting. Any other corrections? All right, hearing none, minutes approved as corrected. Then we'll move to the acceptance of the treasurer's report. Taylor, do you want to fill us in on that?
Bottom line there, EDA has $645,060.56 in its account. Unencumbered balance on economic development fund is $19,190.
Is there any questions on the treasurer's report?
Yeah, I'm going to check the report.
Right. File on that. Thank you, Bob. All right, so then we'll move into all the new business. We had a very small change to the bylaws from the previous month. I believe, Bob, you said it was one word.
That's correct. The emergency law.
And Taylor, do you have anything? I guess just walk us through that. So we
It's a copy of the bylaws, of the Economic Development Authority of Amelia County, included in the packet. Page 2, highlighted in yellow, section 502. The officers shall be elected annually at the first regular meeting of July. Shall commence their duties immediately upon election and continue in office thereafter until a successor has been elected or qualified. This simple change from the January meeting was, just mirrored the board of supervisors. That's when their terms start. This change would be live because that's when the EDA terms start.
Makes sense. All right, is there any discussion on the bylaws change update?
With no discussion with the areas, the biggest thing is IGA. That's the first one. One of the first place.
Well, it's because of the state code says I get it. I'm sure it's new state code. See any others? Okay.
I'm going to be represent. Conflict with the days and section.
What page are you on? Like, oh, page 4. Are you looking at the copy from today's packet? It was corrected. See anything else? So are you happy with that?
The days, you know, kind of where it could be. Assuming that at least one week, thanks to you, but I really appreciate it. 3 days.
Would you like for me to get it to Ms. Scott between now and the next meeting, and if there's some corrections, we'll smooth it out, we take care of it then?
Yes.
Take a little more time to do it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And then we'll take a look at that again next week. Thank you for that. So, all right, any other thoughts or discussion on that? Bylaws either. Okay. So we'll just postpone that till next meeting. And then we were going to do some past member recognition, but it's not here because of a death in the family. And she was able to get the accident. So we're just going to move that to next month's agenda as well. We can invite everyone. Okay, so at this point, we're speeding through this so that we can give you as much time as we can. And it's going to be probably 2 hours. So I hope everybody can stay for this. Just so we can be together for all this training but Roger, like I said on the phone, if you want to hang out, you're welcome to, but don't feel like that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Neil.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for the opportunity to meet with you this morning. We're here as sort of a team of Sandy McNish is the general counsel for the Economic Development Partnership. Commonly known as EDA. We sort of thought we split up the presentation this morning and the discussion. Sandy will start off and do sort of the legal framework for economic development authorities and sort of the common your powers, duties, common programs that are normally administered through an economic development authority. I will follow her presentation up and talk a little bit about some of economic development basics in a couple slides and give you an example of an authority that I'm personally involved in down at Portsmouth, just as it's totally different from your environment, I know, but it'll give you some ideas of the kind of programs that economic development authorities can do. And then following that, I'll go into your strategic plan that was I guess about 8 years ago now, 2013, and go through the highlights of that, and then talk a little bit about how it's prepared and what the contents of that are. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Sandy. And
You have the permissions to share your screen. So if you just hit the share button at the bottom, you'll be able to pull up your presentation.
Let me see if I can pull up PowerPoint. Oh, I had it here.
Sandy, doing that, she was part of the presentations for when we did the strategic plan back down in 13. She was one of two sessions of the planning process. She came in and did a orientation in EDA at that time there. So this is a repeat performance for a stellar actor.
All right, so we'll just use the PowerPoint today. There we go. Can you guys see all of that?
No, so you have to go through at the bottom where it says share. So you can't see your screen until you hit that. Yep. And then choose whichever screen you're sharing.
I don't want to do that. Here we go. Had to scroll all the way to the bottom.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. Let me take it down a little bit. Okay. Neil, thank you for this opportunity. And I was having trouble hearing you, so I put on my pilot head. I hope that's okay. As Neil said, I've known him for a very long time. I started out my career with a private law firm doing public finance work. So I did bond issues for all kinds of things, including the landfill there in Amelia County. And lots of schools and sewer systems and jails and courthouses and just all kinds of public infrastructure. And then I left Troutman Sanders in 2007, so it's been almost 14 years. I'm here now at VEDP's general counsel. So in my first 30-some years as a lawyer, I spent most of my days working with authorities just like yours and working through what can and can't be done under the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act. So I have some grounding in all of that. I was born and raised in Detroit, so it's my birthright to talk fast and to drive fast. So if I'm talking too fast, please just let me know. Feel free during the course of this presentation to shout out questions or raise your hand or whatever you want to do at any time. It'll make it more educational for you and more interesting for me. So don't feel like there's, I know it's especially in a virtual setting, it's hard just to shout things out, but go ahead and shout things out if you want to go from there. All right, we're gonna go through some of this stuff very quickly. All right, I'm going to give just a 30-second introduction to VEDP, my employer. VEDP is really very much like your authority. We are a separate authority created by the Commonwealth that takes on economic development functions for the Commonwealth. So like your authority is a separate authority, a separate political subdivision, we are the same. We have a 17-member governing body appointed by the General Assembly and the governor. Interesting that we have as ex officio members not only sort of the usual suspects, the Secretary of Commerce and Trade and the Secretary of Finance, but we also have the heads of the Money Committee staff. So the lead staff person at House Appropriations and the lead staff person at Senate Finance are also on our board of directors, so that they understand, so the General Assembly understands at all times what we're doing and what money we're spending and so on. And we're grateful for their participation. We've got about 150-ish employees, mostly in Virginia, mostly in Richmond, but we do also have foreign offices in Munich and Japan and South Korea. And our CEO, Stephen Murray, if you've heard of Stephen, would be the first one to tell you that he only took this job because of our structure, and that the CEO, he is appointed by our board of directors and not by the governor. So he is not a gubernatorial appointee. And he used to be a gubernatorial appointee back when he had a similar job at the state of Louisiana, and he understood from that role that if you are a gubernatorial appointee, your time horizon, your ability to do strategic thinking for the future is limited because your time horizon is no longer than the term of your current governor. So we very much want to make business decisions, strategic decisions, and don't want to make political ones. And so that taking a step away from the political winds that blow was important to him and is important to us. Let's get on down. Okay, went on a little too far. Again, not going to go through this. This is our strategic plan that we're currently working under with 5 goals. The most important of the goal, they're all important, but the most important of the goal to us is not only that we have state growth in jobs, but that growth happen throughout the Commonwealth, that every region wins. That's really very important to us. And so you'll see the goals there, and you can go back and read them at your leisure as time allows. Okay, so on to the real presentation. The stuff I wanted to cover today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the legal constraints. Sorry about that. You got to have some of that background, so I know it's boring. I'll try to get through it. Then we'll talk about powers, purposes, and functions, common and less common activities. We're just going to spend a second on the Freedom of Information Act, because I know you have separate training on that, and might spend a second or two on the Public Procurement Act and conflicts of interest if we get a chance, but we're going to focus mostly on the first 3 or 4 topics there. Then everyone's favorite, miscellaneous. Okay, D. Flowers at the Capitol. Okay, Virginia is a Dillon Rule state, meaning that local governments and political subdivisions such as yours and as mine only have the powers that are expressly granted to us by the General Assembly and those that are necessarily implied. So if you have the power to enter into a contract, you necessarily have the power to negotiate and to amend and to manage that contract. Unless the General Assembly says so, the powers granted to local governments and political subdivisions like yours and mine are not to be read expansively, and we'll go through later why that's important. Next one. There are 3 constitutional provisions that are important to authorities. The first is the credit clause that prohibits the lending of public credit for private purposes, and we'll talk later on how that impacts what you do. The next is the public purpose clause, saying, not surprisingly, oh, I'm sorry, what's our question? Okay.
Yeah. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay. The next is the public purpose clause, which suggests that, not surprisingly, public funds should be used for public purposes, and economic development is indeed a public purpose under the Constitution. And then the third of them, and the one that will impact you day to day, is the uniformity of taxation clause, which suggests that all taxpayers and all property in the Commonwealth be taxed similarly. So you can't make a special tax deal for somebody because you have to treat them like you treat every other taxpayer. Okay, powers and duties. So that's a pretty picture. What's in a name? You folks are an EDA, is that right? So you're an Economic Development Authority. There are also industrial development authorities, and perhaps that was your name back in the day. They are exactly the same types of authorities created in the same act, and it doesn't really matter if you're one or the other. But so if you hear that nomenclature being used, the powers and purposes of those authorities are the same. And there are indeed, you are acting under the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act, and I sent a copy of that off to Neil and to Taylor. Hopefully you guys have gotten a copy, or will get a copy of that. So you're a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. You are a separate legal entity. You are not the county is not you. You are a separate legal entity. And as I assume is the case, that you're created just by Amelia County, but there are indeed opportunities under the code to have authorities that are spread across more than one jurisdiction, and usually would have 7 directors appointed by the locality's governing body. Just to let you know, in case you hear other people talking about things, there are lots of other kinds of authorities under the Virginia Code. They all have different powers, different focuses. There are regional industrial facilities, which is sort of like an EDA for more than 2 localities. The unique feature on regional industrial facilities is that there's specific authorization in the code to engage in revenue sharing. So if 4 localities are joining together to build out an industrial park, they can indeed enter into contracts to share the revenues from that industrial park as companies come and pay machinery and tools and real estate taxes. There are redevelopment housing authorities, which obviously do housing, public service authorities that do water and sewer and solid waste, and community development authorities, which do infrastructure in contained and unique geographical areas. Okay. The Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act has very broad powers. The animating purpose, the thing for which you are doing everything under that act, is to promote industry, develop trade. You can see the words there. You are, of course, if you do those things, going to be assisting a company as well. That's fine. But your animating purpose, the reason why you're helping that company, is not because you're helping the company. You're doing it because they're going to invest money, pay taxes, hire people. Those people will pay taxes, and so on. Authorities are uniquely qualified to assist with economic development and to administer incentives because you have powers not specifically granted to the county that created you. Remember, we talked about the Dillon's rule. You only have powers that are expressly granted to you. You have powers that are not expressly granted to the county. And those include the ability to make grants to private entities, to sell properties without holding a public hearing, to lease and sell properties at or above fair market value and not just to the highest bidder, to issue bonds for the benefit of private entities, to make loans to private entities, and if you wish, to forgive repayment of those loans, to exercise all your powers beyond the borders of Amelia County. You have statewide power. You are entitled under your act to think of your powers expansively. Remember, I said earlier that under the Dillon rule, you are generally to look at legislation and code provisions narrowly, that you have to literally point at what you want to do in order to do it. You have the ability under your act to think more expansively. So that's an unusual power granted to you. And as we said, you've got statewide powers. All of these are enormously helpful in an economic development setting. Those are things granted to you, not to the county that created you. No surprise to you, I'm guessing, that most authorities operate on a shoestring. There are often contributions of money from the locality. can be tied to particular revenue streams. Sometimes it's the machinery and tools taxes generated by an industrial park or something of that nature. Amherst County a couple years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, had a oh crap moment when the college was thinking of closing down their #1 economic development engine in the county, and decided they needed to do more than just sit around and wait for the college to spin off revenue. So they added 1 cent to the real estate tax and have dedicated that 1 cent to economic development functions. And they've used it, early on in these early years for doing strategic planning, to take an assessment of properties in the county that are particularly useful or helpful or suited for industrial and commercial development, and are taking some strategic steps to make sure they don't have an oh crap moment again if their largest employer decides to shut down. For those authorities that have industrial parks, there's usually revenues coming from that. If you're issuing bonds, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, or making loans, there's often fees charged for that. There are opportunities for local enterprise zones, and we'll talk about all these zones later on, to capture a % of the real property or machinery tools taxes in those zones. You do not have the power to tax. There are federal grant and state grant opportunities available. We at VDP, for example, have some grants that are available for brownfields identification and remediation, small ones, but can be impactful. Pulaski has done a masterful job of using these brownfields grants and taking properties in their downtown core and doing phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments, just so they know what's there and can deal with any issues that might arise. And so just knowing sometimes is power. So we do have some grant programs available for that sort of thing. And I don't know if this is a trend, and it certainly is not yet a trend for economic development, but I know that in 2018 and 2019, and there were also efforts in 2021 by some localities to have authorization for an additional sales tax in their communities. So, in addition to the 5.3 that you otherwise would pay when you run off to the to Walmart or wherever, they would add an additional 1 cent in those localities, and have dedicated that funding for particular purposes. Not surprisingly, in Williamsburg, it's for tourism development, and for Halifax, they've dedicated that to school construction and renovation. So again, don't know if that's a trend, but an opportunity perhaps if you are looking for additional fundings for your authority purposes. Okay, let's talk about things that many authorities do. We'll talk about each of these in turn. Economic development support, product development, and the product is really everything that you're selling, which includes your workforce, industrial parks, properties, buildings, zoning, your ability to manage the zoning process or a building permit efficiently and effectively. Administering grants and economic development programs, and then issuing bonds that we alluded to a little earlier as well. Okay, for economic development support, both internal and external, economic development is absolutely a team sport, and you guys are important pieces of the parts of the team. The conversation really goes internally and externally. So making sure as authority members that you're keeping in touch with the county staff, the supervisors that appointed you, everyone else that might be important internally within the county, to make sure they understand about economic development and understand the importance of having product ready and being ready for an economic development project. Externally, you want to be the voice of economic development outside of the county, saying nice things about economic development when you're at the the Rotary meeting, or just running into people here and there, talking to prospects who may be coming to your community. So you're the voice of economic development in your communities, and your voice can go a long way. You're leaders in your community, and people respect what you say, and so speaking up and making sure that people understand what it is you do and how you do it is going to be important. Product development, and I suspect Neil will get into this as well. You see here the primary and secondary selection factors that companies have told us are important for decisions on whether to locate or expand an opportunity. And these change from project to project, but they certainly fall in these things. Workforce, critically important. Access to customers and suppliers, critically important. The real estate solution, having land available that's properly zoned, properly infrastructured. The tax and regulatory climate, it doesn't have to be the lowest tax rate that's available to a company. It needs to be the fairest tax rate for a company. Companies know value. They know that in order to have a decent school system and the sorts of infrastructure that they want, that they're going to have to pay some taxes for that. So again, not the lowest tax rate, but the fairest tax rate. Transportation infrastructure is important. Operating costs, which are more difficult for a locality to impact on, but things you can think about. Quality of life factors, making sure you have the appropriate amenities in your county that would attract someone, make it a good place to live, work, and play. So all those things are going to be important, and I suspect Neil will be getting into that with you. The administration of grants. We're sort of at the intersection of Dillon's rule, the credit clause, and the uniformity of taxation clause. Remember, the Dillon's rule only allows you to do that which the code says you can do, and administering grants for private entities is not generally, with some slight exceptions, something that your county can do, so that's up to you. You have the express power to make grants for economic development purposes. Some states can and do offer direct tax abatements. Oh, just don't worry about paying taxes for the next 10 years. Well, you can't do that in Virginia because you have a uniformity of taxation clause. All taxpayers and property similarly situated need to be taxed similarly. But we can get to the same point by doing what I'm going to share with you in just a second. Usually the grants would be payable in installments. Not necessarily, sometimes they're paid up front, but generally they're paid in installments. And oftentimes local grants from communities like yours are paid in installments tied to local tax revenue. So you can't tell a company, oh, just don't worry about paying machinery tools tax, but you can tell them, if you come and invest at least X amount and hire these many people at this wage level, we promise that we'll share back with you, pick your favorite number, 75% of the machinery and tools taxes that you paid the prior year. And here's how you would do that. It's a little complicated. So number one, a tax would be assessed by the locality to the company like any old taxpayer. The company, excuse me, pays the tax like any old taxpayer. The governing body then says, you know what, we agreed with them that we would give back, what did I say, 75% of their machinery and tools taxes. So we're going to pay that money to the authority for economic development purposes. There is specific language in the code that allows localities to pay money to authorities. And then you have specific authorization in the code for you to pay money in the company. So it's a very roundabout way of getting to a tax abatement for a company by using the authority and by using the tools that are given to you in the Code of Virginia. Yeah, a bit roundabout, but there you go. If you're going to make a grant to a company, and if you do or don't is entirely up to you, it's your money, but just you'll want to be cognizant of your return on investment when you're doing that. From the Commonwealth's point of view, we make our money mostly from the individual income taxes paid by all those nice employees earning all of those nice wages, and to some extent sales tax on buildings and equipment that's not machinery and tools. From your point of view, it's going to largely be probably real estate property taxes and the personal property machinery and tools taxes paid by the company. There will be other fees and charges, hook-in fees for water and sewer, that sort of thing. It's not always about the money, but the ROI should form your basis for decisions on whether or not you wish to provide a discretionary incentive. For example, we have one program called the Virginia Investment Performance Grant. It's for existing Virginia employers, have to be around for at least 3 years, that are investing at least $25 million to modernize their plants. It doesn't require any new jobs at all. It does require a maintenance of jobs when they get started, from when they got started, but no new jobs are required. The return on investment to the Commonwealth from those is not very good. If you look just at the grant itself, oftentimes these improvements are machinery and tools, which is not subject to sales tax. So we're not earning sales taxes on that. They're generally not real estate intensive, so there's not much going on there for sales tax. No new jobs required, so there's no new individual income taxes from new employees. But we know that by having a company modernize its plant, that is protecting the jobs that are there. It makes it easier for that company to compete. It makes it easier for that company to compete within its own corporate structure for the next round of investment as well. So we think we're making a strategic investment in those opportunities to protect the jobs that are there. So it's not always about the ROI, but you should know what your ROI is so you can make a rational decision thereafter. You should, if you're going to have a discretionary incentive, you should have a performance agreement of some sort. It doesn't have to be anything terribly formal, but just a written understanding with the company of what you expect from them and what they should expect from you. Oftentimes, authorities will have grants for really very specific programs, issues in their community that they wish to address. In older downtown areas, it's often a facade improvement grant, so a modest amount of money to help companies spruce up the outside of their facility, often on the notion that, you know, the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. So if one guy's improving the outside of his business, maybe it'll you know, shame the guy next door to doing the same. Some communities, Williamsburg, for example, has a signage grant program. So they went through a couple years ago and upgraded all of their signage requirements. And there's so plenty of signs that are out there that are grandfathered. Although I did learn 2 weeks ago that I'm not supposed to use the word grandfathered anymore because that's ageist and inappropriate. I'm like, okay. Sorry. So I just used an ageist term. Sorry about that. I'm going to retire next year. So I think I'm entitled to use that phrase. But anyway, just so you'll know. So they have a modest grant program in place to incentivize existing businesses to upgrade their signs to the new standards. There was an interesting program, I don't know, this was now several years ago in the city of Hampton, where they wanted to increase foot traffic in the downtown central business district. So they had, again, a modest grant for companies to do radio and newspaper ads, and I guess today would be Facebook and, you know, whatnot, just to improve foot traffic. So if you're going to go downtown to take advantage of the coupon in the newspaper from the dry cleaners, maybe you'll pop into the coffee shop or the florist while you're in the neighborhood. And there's, well, as you well know, plenty of localities that have been very active providing grants and loans to their businesses for COVID-19 recovery. Hopefully need for those will go away. Bond financing. So you're entitled to issue revenue bonds for private entities. These are going to be in these categories. They're going to be manufacturing facilities. They're going to be what the IRS calls exempt facilities, which are things that might be privately owned, but have a public flavor to them. Airports, docks and wharves, sewage facilities, solid waste facilities, and also for charitable facilities. You know, your local private school or the YMCA or Goodwill for their retail stores, that sort of thing. And you have statewide power, don't forget that. So oftentimes you may be asked to do a revenue bond financing, especially for a charitable organization where they want to do one bond issue statewide for all of their facilities. So you may be financing the Goodwill retail facility in Amelia and also the Goodwill warehouse in the city of Richmond and you know, a bunch of other stuff around the Commonwealth at once, just to save the company time and money, and just more efficient to do one financing than several. So you remember you have statewide power, so that's okay for you to do. For all of these bonds, you have no payment responsibility. The authority need not ever shell out a dime, even if the company defaults. You are merely acting as a conduit. You are passing along to those manufacturers and exempt facility owners and charitable facilities the ability to access debt that is exempt from federal and Virginia income taxes. You would often collect a fee for doing so. And you might, have you guys done bond issues for your own locality, for your own schools and things? Localities or authorities are often asked to do those as well. Often that's something like a short-term school financing in advance of a more permanent Virginia Public School Authority financing, later in the construction cycle. So you have the ability to issue bonds for which you are not a payment resource, but simply a conduit for the benefit of your own locality, manufacturing facilities, other public-ish facilities, and for charitable organizations as well. So why would a manufacturer or the exempt facility owner or charitable facility do this and go through it? Is to save money on the interest on their bonds. Because of low interest rate environment these days, these are not terribly popular these days. Because yes, you can save money on your interest rate, but since interest rates are so low anyway, often the cost of getting into one of these financings doesn't justify the cost, or the savings don't justify the cost. And for manufacturers, the law that allowed these financings for manufacturers is, boy, it predates me starting the practice of law in 1980, so it's been a very long time since they've been updated, and some of the limits in the code limit their effectiveness and ability to help. So, okay, we talked about 501c3s and doing facilities around the Commonwealth. Okay. Now on to some less common activities that authorities sometimes do. There are a fair number of authorities actually around the Commonwealth that own and operate business incubators. And you might think that those are typically in urban settings, but they're not necessarily there. Carroll County, for example, has a very active and successful business incubator for its businesses. Some authorities own and operate their local airports as a local base operator. Oftentimes, authorities will be asked to do Tesla charging stations and other public infrastructure. The authority in Charles City County used its money from its landfill financings from the fees it charged for that to build a fire station in the industrial park. Some authorities actually run their locality's economic development function. So in Henrico County or Fairfax County, for example, those entities do not have departments of economic development or whatever you might call them. They do everything economic development wise through the authority, much as the state operates through us as being the state's authority. And we'll talk more about these specialty zones in a minute. Some authorities own and finance properties for business. So to the extent the company might be experiencing a shortage, a gap in its financing for a given facility, some authorities will actually do that financing for them. And many authorities operate loan programs, usually modest programs, and usually first money in and last money out. And those local loan programs are often tailored for specific needs. It was really popular back in the 90s and early 2000s for localities to have loan programs for childcare facilities. I don't know if that's still a thing, but so things that are, so you can tailor it if you wish to. If you wish to get into this business, you can tailor it to a very specific need. And as I said, it's usually the first money in and the last money out. Requires staffing to administer properly. You got to stay on top of the loans as you would if you were a banker or something. You need to act like the banker and make sure you stay on top of loans at all times. So it's intensive. Okay, specialty zones. We talked about these a couple times now. The code authorizes various kind of specialty zones, and I swear they, in the dark of night, they multiply themselves. Another one appears in the code the next day. I don't know. They tend to multiply. Started out with technology zones and then added tourism zones and added all those other zones as well. They all have a common, pretty much common, methodology, which is that you can designate a particular zone in your community. Let's call it a technology zone, which need not, by the way, have anything to do with technology. So you can designate a particular area in your localities being a technology zone. That might be one building, might be the entire county. You can do whatever you want. It can be any size zone that you wish to do. And within that zone, you can offer to a particular business or a particular kind of business, or to all businesses, or to all people, or whatever you want to do. Things such as regulatory relief, maybe not worrying about setback or parking restrictions or something in those areas. You can have special zoning in those areas. You can provide relief from a BPOL tax, which is not really a tax, it's a license, which is why you can do that, or fee reductions and waivers. So within those zones, and again, I'm going to pick on technology zones because you can do this anywhere you want to in the community, and the businesses you wish to benefit don't need to be technology zones. So if you want to create a technology zone and do a dry cleaners, you go right ahead. There's just nothing to it. And you can provide that sort of regulatory relief if that's what you want to do. And in a tourism zone, and this really does need to be a tourism project in a tourism zone, you are by code involved in a special program that's allowed to tourism projects and tourism zones to take advantage of a portion of the state sales tax and the local sales tax to help the owner of a tourism project complete the gap financing. So you guys are familiar, like with the Cavalier in Virginia Beach, the beautiful hotel on the hill, that took advantage of this program. So they can capture 1% of the state's sales tax. They can capture the 1% of the sales tax that goes to the city and capture a like amount from the developer and dedicate that source of funding to debt service on financing used for that project. So you've got a $10 million hotel and museum thing coming to your community. He's got an $8 million loan from the bank. He's got $1 million in equity, but he's trying to fix that last, fill in that last $1 million gap. You can use this and have a dedicated revenue stream for debt service to encourage someone to provide the loan for that last $1 million. So that's the goal there. But you are by code involved in these programs to administer the revenues. I know you have FOIA. I'm sorry, moving on now from powers, purposes, etc., onto crummy stuff you need to know, even though it's not very interesting or fun. Sorry. I know you got FOIA training, so I'm not going to repeat any of that at all, but I just wanted to, because I won't cover this in FOIA training, talk about the importance of confidentiality. It's critical to what we do. It is our lifeblood. We're in essence in the problem-solving business. Company is looking for a new real estate solution that's looking for a talented workforce. It needs a little help communicating with DEQ on an environmental matter. Whatever it is, we're in the problem-solving business, and we can't help a company solve those problems and make it easier for them to come to or grow in Amelia County if they're afraid to tell us what those problems are because they don't want to read about it on the front page of the local paper. If your company you're dealing with is a publicly traded company, they definitely don't want to read about it on the front page of the paper because that means that they violated their obligation under the Securities and Exchange Commission to not let material information out other than through their own press releases. Sometimes the company's products or the company itself may be controversial, so you want to keep things quiet for that purpose. Known interest in the site obviously raises its price. Loose lips sink ships. They've gotten better about this lately, but it used to be that at least once or twice a year we would get a project that was planning to go in North Carolina, and they got tired about reading about their project on the front page of the newspaper, and so just came across the line to Southern Virginia, and that happened lately. So maybe they smartened up and have decided not to be quite so chatty in North Carolina. So I'm sorry to hear that. And I've given you our response, our casual response to casual inquiries. So, you know, if you're sitting around at the Rotary Club meeting, and someone asks you, hey, I saw you meeting with somebody, is that a new company coming to town? And your response should be something like, for competitive reasons and to protect confidential information, I'm not going to comment on current or potential economic development projects. So memorize that phrase and use it often. FOIA will.
Yes, Sandra,
Yeah.
I had someone this week try to fish something out of me.
Well, there you go. Again.
And I say it quite as eloquent as that, but I said it.
Well, the phrase that we often use too, and my CEO thinks it's a little too pithy and doesn't like it when we use it, but I'm going to tell you anyway, is that we don't share information on projects, real or imagined. So it's not up for us to comment on whether there is a project or isn't a project, or someone thinks there is one or there's not one. Just don't comment on projects, real or imagined. So yeah. And FOIA will not, your FOIA training will not tell you about what's not a public record. Your brain cells are not a public record. Recollections of what you think about something are not a public record unless you write it down or save it. And so don't do that. Under FOIA, you owe no one an explanation. You owe them a document, a piece of paper, a thing, you know, an email that they asked for. You owe them, you might want to give them an explanation of why you did this or that, but you owe no one an explanation. You owe them a piece of paper, a public record. You'll want to be sure to keep any snarky comments in your brain cells and not written down somewhere, or you know, God forbid, not saved in a voicemail that you may have saved. We get hit by this with some regularity, I'm sorry to say, and sometimes we don't. So we had a project a few years ago, a Chinese project, and the principals were a Mr. Wang and a Mr. Tang. You know, the jokes sort of wrote themselves. So our project managers had some fun, you know, and email it just internally, of course, using those names. Sure enough, we get a FOIA request for that project, and out go all those emails. So our project managers had to write very long, very heartfelt apologies, you know, especially for an Asian company, for taking those people's names in vain, so to speak. You don't want to be in that position, so please don't do that. We had another instance in which, again, internal email, our project manager referred to the company, female company representative, as being a witch, but not witch using the other word. She was, but truth is not a defense. So out goes the email. The reporter calls her and says, "VDP thinks you're, you know, which would be, what do you think about that?" And she was very gracious. "Oh, I was just a strong negotiator." Well, no, she wasn't. She was, anyway. But you don't want to put yourself in that position, so don't. We actually had a good experience, surprising. This would have been, now I guess maybe 3 years ago. Remember when the governor's little blackface incident came out? If I'm remembering correctly, that story broke on a Friday afternoon. The next Friday afternoon, we get a FOIA request for all of the emails internal at VEDP in the prior week that mentioned the governor. I'm like, holy crap. You know, we report to the governor. We get most of our money from the General Assembly through the governor's budget. And this could be ugly. And so we searched all of our records and find every email during that week that mentioned the governor. And there were lots of them because we were sending him on a on a trade mission not too long after that. And he approves all of our grants. So there's stuff back and forth on those grants. There wasn't one single email addressing the blackface issue. Not that people weren't having perfectly nice conversations about that on their own, but they chose to not write any of that down. I've never been so proud of 150 people in my life. So just, if you don't want to see it in the front page of the paper, although that's probably an old phrase now too, right? Then just don't write it down anywhere. So they won't tell you that in the FOIA training, but I just did. And again, just to reiterate, because they might, I forget what they do in FOIA training. Authority-related emails on your home computer are public records. Authority-related emails on your work computer are public records. authority-related emails sent and received in your personal email account are public records, and authority-related text on your personal cell phone are public records. So just, it doesn't matter where or how those things came into being, they are indeed public records. Some authorities at this point in time have a discussion on whether or not, and maybe you already do this, I don't know, authority members having a county email account, so you can do everything through that account. So at least should there be a FOIA request, you know where everything is. You know, it's in one place on those handy dandy little county accounts, but you know, that's up to you. Just keep in mind that the hardware doesn't matter. It's whether or not it's a thing, a piece of paper, an email, an electronic thing having to do with authority business. And they won't tell you in FOIA training, so I'm going to tell you now. The primary economic development exemption that we rely on every day, it allows us to protect proprietary information provided by businesses. So this is what we use, again, every day to protect from disclosure that confidential information that companies share with us so we can help them solve their problems. So that's where that ability lies. And we're often asked to enter into non-disclosure agreements. Those NDAs can never trump FOIA. FOIA allows you to protect proprietary information from disclosure. The NDA will likely require that you protect that information from disclosure. You need not necessarily sign an NDA submitted to you. I get these 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week from a company that wants us, oh, we got to use our form. Well, you know what? Their form's not going to be, not going to cut the mustard for us. So we will undoubtedly doctor up their form. They will undoubtedly have a definition in the form for confidential information. I will tinker with that definition to make sure we're speaking of proprietary information, because as we just saw, we are allowed to protect proprietary information from disclosure. So I will use that word in the NDA. They're often governed by the law of wherever the company is. No reason for that to be the case. It should be governed by Virginia law. We're talking about a Virginia law, and everything that happens for the NDA is going to happen in Virginia. They often have weird things about and you can never make a copy of any of the confidential information. Well, that's just kind of stupid. If my project manager, you know, Mary, is heading off to a meeting at the community college system to discuss training needs at different levels of jobs in the company, she's probably going to want to print out a copy of the job ramp up and job classifications from the company so that she can take that with her to the meeting. That should be a perfectly reasonable and perfectly acceptable thing. And so you just want to make sure that you read the NDAs, change what needs to be changed, make sure you can live with whatever it is the NDA says, and go on from there. Let's see. Not really going to get into procurement and conflicts. Other than to say, again, you won't get this in your training, which I know you're going to have. It's part of your job to make connections, to know that the machine shop over here has a special skill that maybe that manufacturer over there can take advantage of, and to make, oh, hey, have you talked to Bob about, you know, it's your job to be helpful in those sorts of, and to look for those sorts of situations. Seeing the big picture is part of your job. You want to be sure, though, if you're making those connections and recommendations and things, that your desire is to help the company and not to help you or your friend. And I know this is really challenging in smaller communities. I worked on a bond issue one time for, well, now closed, St. Paul's College, you know, lovely HBCU in Brunswick County. You know, 7-member authority, right, just like you. Of the 7 members, one guy was the local bank president. He was making the loan for the college. One guy is the college president, obviously our borrower. One guy is the construction contractor who's building the building. and I know it just goes on for there, but so you're going to be entangled, but just be careful. The rules are challenging. The rules are in many respects contradictory, so be sure to check with your local county attorney if you have any questions on whether you should or shouldn't be making connections and doing things. And yeah, no lying, cheating, and stealing. We know that. And we've talked throughout this that you have a lot of powers. You have powers that are not granted to the community that created you. So I just want you to be careful and mindful of that power as you're going forward. I heard a presentation a year or two ago from the authority folks in Halifax, and through their strategic plan, they have identified these five things as being particularly important for them and for their bedrock in making all their other decisions, and that seemed like a pretty good list to me. So I thought I'd share that. Resources. Okay, there's my VDP's website. The Virginia Economic Developers Association is a statewide trade group for folks like you. You might want to consider joining and participating in VEDA. The Council of Development Finance Agencies is a nationwide trade group of folks like you who do economic development. If you go on their website there, it's cdfa.net, and it's not cdfa.org, because I make this mistake all the time. If you type in cdfa.org, it takes you to the California Domestic Ferret Association, and you don't really want to be there. So it's cdfa.net. I've done that more than once, so yeah, so I know this. cdfa.net. But if you go there, they have a number of newsletters and things that can be helpful and provide interesting information on a variety of topics. They have one sort of general newsletter, comes out every Thursday, and I make it a point to read that whenever that comes out. They also have separate newsletters come out a little less regularly on maybe it's brownfields or tax increment financings, or a variety of topics. So you'll want to go there. Their website has a wealth of information, and I think you'll find that useful. Area Development Online is a organization. Area Development is an organization made up of site selection consultants, and they have a wonderful newsletter. Comes out on Fridays, I think, so no reason not to sign up for the free newsletter. Same thing for Site Selection Magazine. They have free subscriptions, and also the Department of Housing and Community Development, Virginia Housing, has some interesting and helpful information on their website as well. So I draw your attention to those resources as well. And that's all I wanted to cover for you nice folks today. Did you have any questions or need anything else from me?
The only question I have, Sandy, is that, can you email or send that presentation and say,
We've already got it.
already got?
Yeah.
I've got a printout here for you.
So lots of back and some late evening, now we want to go through that.
Yeah, right.
We've also got it recorded here, so we'll all be able to go back and listen later on if you want to.
And should we ever get back to actually having, real live meetings, I'm happy to show up sometime and we can discuss things as well. So I'm actually right now at my sister's house in the Outer Banks, so I'm glad her internet has a.
Thank you for taking your time to, interrupt the.
No, I'm working. I just happen to be working from the Outer Banks this week, so.
Okay. Yeah.
You can work from anywhere. I can work from my den, or I can work from my sister's house. So there you go.
There you go.
Or lunch.
Any other questions or thoughts or comments?
A lot of information.
It is a lot, and I went very quickly, and I know I talked too fast, so sorry about that.
You did great. Thank you very much. That was very informative.
We got a lot more power than I realized we had.
Yeah.
Oh, you really do. I mean, seriously. So long as you keep in mind your primary purpose of, dealing or enhancing economic development in your community, you've got very broad powers to do pretty much any darn thing you want to do.
It was an idea back in the beginning, but we financed the landfill. That was millions and millions and millions of dollars, and that little coupon or whatever it was that we collected at the end of the year, that financed us for the next 20 years.
Yeah, I was a bond counsel on that financing, so I remember it well.
Yeah.
Especially the public hearing. That was fun.
Oh. No doubt.
Excuse me, Thank you, Dr. Chair.
Okay, well, I'm going to sign off, guys. Good seeing you.
Good
Thank
seeing
you.
you again, Sandy.
Thank you.
Bye
You
now.
ought to be-
Should we take a 2-minute break?
That'd be wonderful. Yep.
Yeah, I got a couple phone calls on it.
So let's just make it real quick and.
Yeah.
We'll get out of here.
Yeah.
May slide back to that. Damn. Oh, wow. Yeah, I might get that way too.
Like that.
Offline conversation about the
You can just, up and on.
We have a meeting the week prior to go over the agenda. Make up the agenda.
You and Alfred.
Yeah, that was a lot to unpack. But that was much more pleasant trying to go through the code.
Whereas and shall, or
Yeah.
That was Mr. Tatum calling in to say that he had forgotten to call a little earlier to say he could not make it today. He's in Deltaville.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's at the shore. I can't understand it. What are we doing stuck here?
Actually, I think he's working.
Oh, I know.
And there is going to be, well, he can say him. Somebody's been having discussions about rezoning a piece of land that they just purchased down at, beside the quarry. It was make some heavier duty works, Tom. So that's something we'll probably be hearing about in 60 days.
Yeah, we're gonna need to get on scheduling this FOI. We run some kind of time constraint on it. 60 days after we take, 2 days after we take it off.
Brenda takes care of all. She did send me a message this morning. He's hoping to be back. He's a better gardener Thursday.
Go through it. Then it prints out a certificate at the end of it.
I'll follow up with her. We'll make sure it doesn't slip under the wire.
Has, another question. How do you ever use eminent domain?
The county has used eminent domain, in my experience, one time. And that's when we were building Richmond Road out. We were making it wider with this money that the quarry and sand plant had given us. And there were two guys that just said, you're just gonna have to take it. So we talked.
Somebody told me that took the land that we're gonna build a high school.
We did. That was really before my time. My daddy was still in the men. That was 1970. He died in 74. He did the appraisals. When he pulled into the yard, the family was there. Daddy was actually appraising the cattle too, because families were selling. And old man Tice was the guy who owned it. He was a tough old bird. Daddy walked up there and Mr. Tice told the family, said, "This is Mr. Harvey. He's going to put numbers on our stuff, and nobody will say anything to him, pull a pistol out of his pocket, put it right up on the hood and say, does everybody understand that?
Got it.
Ice is also the guy, you know where Wayland's is on 60?
Yeah.
All right, in the olden days, it was 2-lane road, uphill. He used to drive these old cattle trucks. He hauled, he was a businessman. But he was going really, really slow and had to stop for some reason. There was and the young guy behind him got out and mouthed him. And it was, I think it was construction going on. Ice got out with one of these canes. You know, he finally hobbled out of his truck, got his cattle cane, and he whacked that guy so hard that the police had to come. He laid him out and it was like, hey, you spoke to somebody like you shouldn't have. Nothing happened to him. But they said he laid that boy out.
My
Can't do
dad,
that now.
my dad's cousin had a farm right there in that property.
When was the high school built? So I think 77.
Yeah.
3 seconds of trouble.
That sounds about right.
Doesn't it?
Elementary.
That's a well-built school building.
What in the world is this? Raise that.
Carbon paper somewhere.
They didn't have to condemn that. I raised that for the school board, and they were gonna be, in some way, they thought the numbers that I come up. So that was. it might have been,
I would love to stay.
elementary.
Thanks for all.
The commitment was made early in
Information.
1992.
Give me.
But they acquired our land. That go in there, did you get it back?
Tell you that you go.
Perfect. Stay. All right. All right, well, we'll see you. See y'all later.
Ready? Okay. What I'd like to do is just basically start off and kind of simplify economic development. There's basically 4 things that businesses need, and all of economic development is structured around those 4 basic items. A business needs a place to do business, as we call that product. Usually it's sites and the building. Whatever you need to support it, the utilities that need to support it, the broadband, there. Second main basic thing business needs is workers. You know, quality people that can run the business, whether it's a single proprietor, you know, itself, like that. The third thing is that every business needs is basically a modest cost of doing business. You know, and that modest cost or reasonable cost can be in the short term, getting started, you know, getting up and running, or in the long term, you know, things about getting up and running, the cost of the utilities, to extend utilities down, the cost of the building, you know, the getting your capital, your equipment in, those kind of expenses that you incur up front. Your long-term costs are, you know, your real estate taxes, your utility bills, workman's compensation, those are your longer term, your labor costs, et cetera. So those are 3. The fourth one, most businesses that have been in business have this, but basically it's the business skill, the knowledge of running the business. And for people that are startups, they usually know something about their what they want to do. You know, if you're a carpenter, you know how to frame, you know, houses, but you may not know how to keep books, like that kind of thing. So that's there. So those are the 4 basic elements that we have, and everything in economic development revolves around that. In terms of economic development, in terms of strategies, those are basically, you know, 3 or 4 basic strategies. One, business recruitment, bringing in businesses from outside your locality to locate in your locality. What we call BRE, which is business retention and expansion. let me go there. And that is basically helping the existing businesses that are here grow and prosper. That's third one is basically what I call grow your own, which is helping people that want to get in business, start their business, get up and running. The sort of the next area is what Andy indicated is one of the key business factors now, even more so than sites and building, but it's workforce. Yes, and I've been doing a bunch of interviews in Southside over the last 2 weeks with economic development folks. And what I hear constantly is all businesses got to help on and sign out, there's some way, either virtually or whatever. So workforce development right now a big factor. And in some cases, tourism development is another. There may be sector initiatives, downtown development. So that gives you sort of a broad scope of various types of strategies. What I would like to do now is in your package, there's two things in there. These two items. I just wanted to go over. I'm a member of the Portsmouth Economic Development Authority. I've been for years. Portsmouth is about 90,000 population. It's not a real big city, and it's like you has had there. Being an older city, we're pretty well built out, and the lots are small typically, and for businesses to grow and expand, it's usually a situation of redevelopment or consolidation of property. We have a fairly high minority population, and there's a sense that the folks that work in or live in our community really don't get the opportunities to work in our community or start a business. So there's been a strong emphasis on trying to help businesses to go along. And I'll start off with this, which is the budget, which illustrates the kind of thing. In our model, our EDA doesn't get a dime from the city. The model is that we have a bunch of property, we sell that property, revenues from the sale of the property go into supporting economic development programs there. We don't have any staff. We rely upon the city's economic development staff, and we work hand in glove with them. We have a liaison from the city council. We have two actually that participate on a regular basis, and the city manager attends whenever she can. So we've got a new city manager now. Just to give you sort of background about the importance of the relationship between your governing body and the EDA, and particularly the staffing of there. At the top of there, the revenues you're going to see there is this past fiscal year. We had budgeted about $500,000, but we actually sold about $3 million worth of property. So that gave us a pretty sizable there. You probably have read about the casino coming into Portsmouth. Okay. That is going to be going on a piece of EDA property, which we call Victory Village property. It's 32 acres right off of 264. They're going to pay the EDA $15 million for that property. So that will be the big revenue supply for our EDA to support activities going forward. The rest of it is relatively minor. We did there. We have an agreement with the city. They lent us money back some time ago, and we passed it on to the the Renaissance Hotel bought the property for there, and they pay us a lease fee, and that goes back to the city. So that's $125,000 revenue, but you see, going back to the city, yeah, it's a pass-through. Since we've sold so much of our property over the last year, what next major factor is about $3 million. We're projecting to, yeah, go ahead, sir.
How did you accumulate this property?
It came from a bunch of different sources. This about a year ago, there was a development corporation in the Portsmouth, which was called the Portsmouth Greater Development Corporation. Yeah, and they had there was a combination of the Chamber of Commerce, a business-led organization, the Housing Authority, and the EDA. It was a nonprofit corporation. Back a number of years ago, 15, 20 years ago, they bought the property and they debt financed it. We took over that property and the note that went with it. You'll see the repayment of the note later on in there. So
Okay.
there. That was one source. We got some properties from the Housing Authority there, and we've gone out and purchased some properties. So there's been a combination of trying it in that way. So since our inventory properties is getting kind of low, we budgeted about $3 million to begin on acquisition property. But if we don't have properties to sell, we don't have a revenue stream to support the program. Okay. Coming down a little bit farther in red, you'll see that economic development grants. The incentive for businesses, a lot of times VEDP has a incentive thing, but it requires a local match. So what we're doing is we're budgeting this year for about $1 million to support any prospects that come in that need an incentive, and we need to match what the state will do. So that's about that. We got another one down in red is that 275, which is contractual services. That's for two things we're doing. We're going to do a study of contract opportunities within the city, not necessarily city contracts, but business contracts, so that we can match our small businesses in the city to contracting opportunities that are there. So that's one thing. And then the rest of that money is going to go for due diligence related to the acquisition of the new property. So we got some money into that. Right below it is a workforce development initiative about $135,000. This past year, we partnered with the city. The EDA refurbished a floor in a downtown office building for a workforce development training center there. And the city agreed to hire a staff person on their economic development staff to help do the programming in that center, as well as to do small business startup classes. So we have a pipeline called small business startup there. Going down through another big item that I'd call your attention to, done under non-operating expenditures, $300,000 under the local incentive program. These are grants to businesses. We had what we call the LIP program. It started out as Sandy was a facade improvement program for downtown to help improve the storefronts of the business downtown. Then it expanded to include interior build out of their space, so that not only could you fix up the front, but you could also, if you're moving in, help with that. And then there was also a security grant that went along with it. So those three elements made up the LIP program, and you would be eligible for right about $50,000 maximum on a reimbursable basis. So it's a 50-50 match reimbursement. You bring in your receipts when you're done with your construction, and we write you a check. The EDA wanted to revise that, so again, it started in downtown, and then those three programs went citywide. And now they're city. So we revamped that into what you see here. And this is a new, what those business incentive programs. And it has three components. Basically, startup businesses. If you go through the training program that we mentioned for startup classes, when you finish that and you finish your business plan, you get $2,000. We'll give you a grant of $2,000, but you got to finish. That's for companies that are just starting up or less than 3 years of age. For companies that are 3 years of age, about 7 years of age, just, they're getting up. They've been in business a couple of years and they want to expand. So we've got another little grant program. It's 20%. They have to participate, but we do 80% for $5,000. And that sort of help them get grow their business to the next level. Could be purchase of equipment, could be new marketing program to expand into a new market, or, whatever like that. But they've got to have a business plan and do a marketing plan if they want to do marketing. Yeah. Then the third one in the back is the replacement program for what I talked about earlier, and it's called basically a real estate investment program. So if you can do facade improvements, exterior improvements, interior improvements, site improvements, landscaping, signage, all of those things, and you get a matching grant up to $20,000. And that's again on a reimbursement basis. Right now, we're going to increase the 300,000 to about 500,000 for the the startup and the ramp up program, about $100,000 each, and $300,000 for the real. We've had the LIFT program for a number of years, and that's been very popular, and just been everything from childcare to retail to there kind of things.
You fund all of that yourself?
We designed it.
Buying and selling.
That's right. Yep.
Interesting.
That's the model. Yep. So, as you can see, the second page really, if you look at net position, we hit, beginning of the year about $13 million of our expenditures. We starting at the beginning of last year was about $13 million over there, and then we had about 12 million. And sometimes we sell property at below market value, depending on what the project is. The Victory Village property for the casino is a big windfall for us because that's a $15 million thing. But I'll give you a couple of examples. We had a Fairlead, which is a contractor. They do marine construction. I mean, building of ships and repair of ships kind of thing. And they had a small operation. They over in Newport News. They're in Port Norfolk, which is part of Portsmouth. And then they wanted to expand because they got a contract with Newport Shipbuilding to do the sections of submarine. They're going to do. So they bought a marina right on the downtown Portsmouth, and we own the property next to it. So they purchased that property for $500,000. we just had, coffee company, and I can never pronounce their name correctly. It's an Italian company that's right there when you get off of 264 downtown. They moved to Suffolk and expanded out there. And the property that they were in is relatively small and not very useful, but we owned the property next to it, between that and the interstate. They had a railroad track right away under there. So we sold that to them, to the new company, so Frito Lake could go in there. So they're going to be in there in October and expand. Again, that was another $500,000.
Are you buying your properties cash? Do you ever finance? Is there?
We do financing of the properties, yes, we like that. Yeah, let's see, we've got some of the finance. We're paying off 2 loans there. One is a little about $3 million, and yeah. But yes, we do. Depending on the and another one, we assembled the properties in on High Street, which is the main drag in Portsmouth, in a block. There was a half a dozen different properties in there. So we sold that to a multifamily developer there. We actually sold it to him a little bit at a discount because his pro forma for the development that he's there, and he's going to put 52 condominium units there, about 2,000 square foot condominium units. And the price tag is going to be a really good 325, less than 325. But I gave you that as just as an overview of the kinds of things that, EDAs can do. And I'll give you a couple of other things. When we did, let me go.
Condos gonna be on the river.
No, they're not. They're going to be on High Street, which is there. We do own, you're probably familiar with the old Holiday Inn site. We own the Holiday Inn site, and the city owns the garage that's next to it. And we own the piece of property where the old visitor center is. That's going to be our next project, probably in the next couple of years. We're going to be soliciting national developers to come in, and that probably is a mixed use. That probably will likely be condominiums and major portion of that. Anyway, but that's the model. But let me go back. Yeah. In a little bit about the strategic planning process we did in the 2013. One of the communities that we visited was Halifax County. And Sandy had mentioned that Henrico and Fairfax County have authorities that manage all of their economic development. Brunswick and Halifax are the 2 other rural counties that are like that. It's a rare, it's mostly, most of the models, economic development models are like you are here. Your staff operates the staff function of the or supportive and a partnership with them doing it. Just to go back a little bit, with the process was from May 2012 through January 13th. We did basically monthly meetings during that. We did a little bit of visioning sessions to begin with. Sandy came down and did pretty much the same presentation there as training. We also like to do, we did have Vedp come in and say, hey, this is our perspective of you. In other words, when we're talking to firms that we, that are looking at, this is how we characterize Amelia County to those people. And this is the kind of activity that we've seen. this is how you may be well suited for the kind of prospects, business prospects. Business recruitment side, particularly, that's been very helpful. So that was the other presentation that we had in August of there. Then we after doing a little bit, we did a little bit of background about what your economic conditions are. Did a sort of a summary of background information. And there's two community profiles I recommend to you on the VEDP website. They have a community profile. Sort of give some statistics related to that. And if you just Google VEDP community profiles, and then Virginia Employment Commission also has a community profile on it related to some economic data too. And that's pretty good. That'll give you average wages. So we did that. Then we spent quite a bit of time, what I would call reviewing your assets, establishing a vision, and then establishing the strategies, the goals, objectives, and strategies. Okay. Here was the vision statement that was developed there. And I'll just go ahead with the greatly expanded commercial and industrial base. Our citizens no longer come from neighboring localities to find quality employment. In fact, the county, in partnership with the private sector, has been successful in filling 3 industrial parks with businesses using state-of-the-art technology. Our youth now have the option of staying at home or returning home to quality job opportunities right here in Amelia County. The expanded commercial industrial base has allowed the tax rates to remain among the lowest in the state. The concentration of new development along the major transportation corridors has allowed the county to remain rural and farmers to maintain their farms and agricultural production. So that was sort of a lofty vision statement of what you would like to see for your citizens.
I don't think any of that's changed. Still true.
That's true. That's sort of the vision where you want to go.
Yeah.
Good. Then the assets that were identified at the time and county-owned industrial park. You've been very successful. Congratulations to you. You've sold that industrial park. Taylor tells me it's an individual that sort of does what spec office, spec building space for small businesses and contractors.
That's one of his components. He's mainly a earth moving contractor, but he is developing niche doing this. That's correct.
It struck me that is really symptomatic of what your strategic position is here. Like he's coming from Chesterfield County down here to basically replicate there to support businesses that will serve probably Chesterfield County as well as Amelia County. So it indicates the strong connection that you have in your economy to your neighboring locality. Yeah.
Sort of, to me, it's sort of it's taking after the industrial park up in Louisa. That's sort of UVA's put up a medical facility in there. And all kinds of things. I mean, so including Albemarle.
That's good illustration. Yeah. Good comparison. Yeah. Location near 288, central location on the mid-Atlantic coast, fringe of the metropolitan area. Again, one of your characteristics, you have strong out commuting, both east and some west to the Farmville area as well. Availability of water and sewer, I understand that there's a need to upgrade, expand this utility system some. Yeah. Pro-business environment, low taxes, all good. County helps meet the needs of businesses, again, a supportive business climate. Good highway up there and broadband access at the park. Schoolship, is that still going on, the partnership with CCAM?
So I'm gonna say no since I'm on the
Okay, CCAM is the Commonwealth Center for Advanced Manufacturing. And it's down there, just off of 460 in Prince George County, right there.
We are.
Probably that.
We had some kids that were going there getting machinists.
So John Tower has taken over a precision machine program, so maybe it's this very. Yeah.
All the assets, okay, well, basically you tap into the regional assets there, quality of life, historic homes, affordable housing. This is an interesting point. Some of the localities to the south of you all, like in the Dansville, Pennsylvania, Mecklenburg County, what I'm hearing now is that there isn't a adequate supply of what I would call middle income housing for managers and technical professionals. That it's the supply of affordable housing is upper end housing fine, but they have a hard time filling that middle gap. Anyway, low crime recreation. Okay, the goals of the plan were to basically develop fully serviced industrial land parks with marketable community commercial properties there. When we did this, the standards for industrial property have increased over the last year. Virginia Economic Development Partnership now has a what they call a tier rating system from tier 1 to tier 5. Tier 1 is basically a bean field doesn't even have zoning, but the owner is interested in marketing it for commercial purposes. So that's there. A tier 5 on the other end of the scale is you've got all the utilities in, all the transportation, access roads are in place. You've got a graded path for the business, and you've done all the due diligence that's necessary, environmental work, title work, et cetera. So it's ready to go. So there. On statewide, there are very few tier 5s. There's a major effort. Most of the properties, like 70% of the properties are what they call tier 2, which are typically publicly owned. They have utilities to them, but they don't have a lot of due diligence. So that's the tier 2. And there's a major efforts now statewide to go from tier 2 for majority of the properties up to tier 4, which is basically, shovel ready with the exception of a pad. Where you have that. So I think that's still a good thing. The next sort of goal was to expand the utility system to serve the industrial commercial areas. The third goal was basically to provide a high quality workforce through training programs for the youth and adults. And the fourth one was sustain an active visionary county economic development program. And lastly is to maintain a proactive business climate. in the okay, in terms of objectives, ensure the vacant land building existing park. Okay, so we can scratch that one because the park is off the market now. But I think the following ones are still very legitimate. Purchase and develop of land adjacent to existing industrial park and or develop and acquire land along the 360 corridor. And identify there. Identify, the last one was sort of identify. Identify additional industrial properties throughout the county and partner with the private sector development. Mecklenburg County, sort of interest, just to sum up, they have been very aggressive. Both Mecklenburg and Halifax have been historically very aggressive in developing industrial parks in combination with their economy. Mecklenburg County had four tier 4 industrial park properties. Microsoft came in fourth quarter of last year and the first quarter of this year and bought them all up. But they're there. They do have the regional industrial park, which is like that for Brunswick County and Mecklenburg County. And they've got a shell building that they built in there, which is their Mecklenburg County right now is in need of going back out and building some more. Halifax County over the years have been very aggressive also in building industrial parks, but also with successful shell buildings. They've been going ahead and built several shell buildings, and over the years, and they've marketed those and sold them. They will tell you the shell building has been basically the billboard that has brought business prospects into their community. While a lot of the businesses came to look at the shell building, they decided not to buy the shell building, but to buy land and build to it. Historically, that's been their trend. It's been a way to do that. Another county that has been very successful over the years in the shell building is Henry County. I've been just completed analysis of sites and buildings in the southern area here, what they call Go Virginia Region 3. And it's interesting to me that the localities that had the most industrial parks and available industrial property were 5 localities. Mecklenburg, Brunswick, Danville, Pennsylvania County, Henry County. VEP prospect activity, 80% of the prospect activity went to those 5 localities out of the 15 localities in the Go Virginia region. And that was for the period of 2018 through, well, July 1st of this year. And I looked at the announcements too for the companies that actually announced. 90% of the announcements went to 3 localities. That was Danville, Pennsylvania County, and Henry County. And over 90% of the jobs and investment.
Wittenberg built a shell building. I don't want to say that thing sat there for 5 or 10 years.
It sat there for a long time.
Person that had never been developed. County. Hello.
It is I think that's characteristic that if you, okay, back to the basics. If you don't have, a place for people to do business, they're gonna go someplace else. Okay, okay. Okay. The objectives, the restructure operating this body. I understand there's been some changes over the time in the Amelia and Ottawa. Yeah, so I think is that an opportunity still, or is that off the table?
Tech center?
Yeah,
The yearly thing, isn't it?
Tech center's always been topic of conversation. But we have, our students go to a lot of different places for tech. We have a really strong partnership with Untitled. Tech is under 5-year funding.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's what we're going to do. I think that is one of the things that for us to attract people, we're going to have to be doing more with that. I have some thoughts, from when I moved to Pennsylvania down here, they had a very active Vedp, paid some people small sums of money to be good teachers, and they cranked out really good. It was local people that, like electrical.
The tech center's complicated. There's a lot of different reasons that the tech center's constantly in conversation. It's just open really to Amelia and Ottawa, where neither of our school divisions are very large. And we operate under different schedules. And so it winds up being an issue for the tech center operates because Nottoway has 60% share. They have Nottoway schedule, not ours. And so it limits Amelia students on the programs that then they have access to when they come back to school, because they only go to the tech center for a portion of the day. And so it's worth the chance. But it's hard because of the location. So it's hard to find staff to do anything. But it's really hard to find qualified staff close to the tech center. It's really hard to get students interested in the programs. And if you look at the programs that the tech center is offered, they're not necessarily programs that would train up our youth into businesses that we want. So.
It needs a rethought.
So they're 5 years old.
one option that is available in Go Virginia Region 3 is the what it's called the Go Tech program. And you may be more familiar with it anyway. It's that is to sort of start at the middle and high school and get those children oriented to advanced manufacturing and more technology oriented careers, and then providing a pipeline of training from middle high school onto community college and off to 4 years.
One of the reasons I think we should visit the tech center.
So that
See what we have to market.
may be an option there. And rather than CCAM, probably that needs to be modified to that Go Tech program rather than CCAM. But I don't really think it's see what your connections are there. These probably are still, creating a staff and economic development function within the county governmental structure. Periodically update the strategic plan and prepare and implement a annual work plan. This sort of. This was sort of a suggestion. In other words, a business come forward, do we have incentives or are we willing to provide incentives? And if we are, under what conditions? And so to set up there. Maintain a sort of fast track approach to permitting. Getting under operation is critical for a lot of businesses. It's a challenge in Portsmouth. But I hope that you do not have. I don't think you
We
do.
don't have it,
Yeah, I don't think you have it here.
especially since we, host the person from the school board. It goes with the permit.
And they're, modest cost of, doing business is pretty selfish, I think. There. And then, that's pretty much the summary. What thoughts, questions you might have?
We have a long way to go, but this is our plan, and we wanted to be there in 2030.
Well, I think it, I've said this before, I think it's a good plan. I think it's still pertinent. We just have built out our industrial park, now we're ready to start over. So if we were doing a plan to start over, this is the plan.
And I'm fascinated by the way that you fund your. Yeah, I think that we could do really well with that. And I really, we have got to work on workforce. I know everybody's saying that, but we can't, none of this here is never happen unless we can develop some better candidates for jobs here in the county.
Do we take, I don't even know, do we have some kind of workforce development thing that we could, a resource that we could draw on? Maybe Chesterfield or,
So we're part of that ACT WRC workforce. We were, I guess, the first county in this way that became certified. It's an ongoing effort to maintain certification. Schools are a big component. They test all of the seniors. We test existing workforce folks. I guess students are called emerging, but we've got existing. We're still compliant, meeting all of our goals for another 2 or 3 years out. But, they give you benchmarks to reach for. So we do that. And we're part of this South Central Workforce Investment Board. We go to those meetings. They're mainly service providers, programs and things. Our numbers historically haven't stood out as a member of that group because our folks can drive to Richmond and work, whereas it's a little more difficult for somebody in Lunenburg or Brunswick or Halifax to do that.
I was thinking more, I know Petersburg has a workforce development authority down there, and they actually have a place that people go and take classes, I don't know if there's anything like that around that we could hook on to or not.
I don't.
You're part of the Votech Center?
We've made a couple of runs and given the VDOT building and offered it as an educational site for Tyler as well as I think Deborah Crowder made her run at it one time.
So Virginia, they're not interested.
We're not part of Southside. We're not in their region. We're in John Tyler's region. But our schools are served more by Southside. We go to the governor's school.
We have 2 government schools, and we have one at Southside, in terms of like VOTEC or CTE work.